say you don't believe in the supernatural, and anything supernatural is that which is not natural, would you say that that would refer to anything that's not composed of matter?
No, energy is not composed
Okay,
of matter. We know energy exists.
sure, and gravitational pulls and stuff like that, right?
Well, those are forces, yeah. Antimatter is not made of matter, but we know it exists. We can make
Yes, yeah,
antimatter.
absolutely. So I was just asking if you reject if you're a materialist essentially.
I don't exactly know what a materialist is. I may be one, but
So I would say a materialist is somebody that believes that all that exists is matter or things that are bound by matter. So, for example, energy, um, from my understanding, is although not composed of matter, reliant on matter. Or, for example, gravitational pulls, um, they can't exist without the space-time continuum. They can't exist without some sort of body. So, would you say there's anything aside from those things that that is not material that you would reject?
that I'd reject. So I'm not taking the stance on rejecting anything. I just fail to believe. I think the universe is the only thing that exists. It's the only thing I believe exists. Now it include whatever dark energy is, whatever dark matter is, regular baryonic matter, fundamental forces, and all of that.
Sure. Okay. All
I,
right.
I
Yeah.
don't I don't say God doesn't exist, and I don't, or well, we'll just put it that way. I mean, maybe I'm a hypocrite because if you ask me, do ghosts exist? I'll say no.
Hmm.
But then when it's like with God, it's like, I mean, God could exist, but because I'm not a Gnostic atheist, I'm an agnostic atheist. So I guess ghosts could exist, but I
Sure.
see absolutely no evidence of it, right?
Yeah. Um, would you consider yourself? Uh, would you reject dualism?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you reject dualism, something like that, or
Mind body
how
dualism? Well,
is-
I don't see any convincing evidence that souls exist, so probably
Mhm. Okay. So what do you think? How do you define intentionality?
doing something for a on purpose for a reason, I guess.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Sure.
Philosophically, I don't
So
know if that means something particular, but
sure. So I would say I would agree. I might like disagree slightly and say I would just say intentionality is uh, a state of intention or a normative state in which there's a direction or an aim. So you can have intentionality without an action.
how so? What you're
You
sounding
can
to
have.
me is what you're saying to me is what I think of as orthogenesis. But
I'm not familiar with that, but a thought, for example, might be something that is intentional but is not an action.
I guess I could agree with that in the sense that I think the only way for us to have thoughts is through chemical actions in our brains. But I don't know what thoughts are, and I don't
Hmm.
know what consciousness is. So I could agree with you pretty much in that.
Hmm. So when you say that you're not positive, or when you say that thoughts are just chemical reactions, can you expand on that a little bit?
No, that's where they come from. I
Okay.
see I see no evidence that anything other than organisms have real thoughts.
Hmm.
I I don't know what thoughts are. I just think that they come from our brains, right? Like I don't know what the
Yeah.
mind is, but I think it's a product of the brain. So I think that like organisms are the only things that can have thoughts, right? So I don't know if a tree can have a thought. They do things that seem to be like they're doing them on purpose in a weird sort of way, but I don't think I don't know if I or science will ever have the ability to know what it means to think and whether or not a tree can, right? So
Yeah. Okay. Are you familiar with qualia?
I've had it described, but I couldn't remember or give you a definition of it right now.
So I would describe qualia as individual experience in a very like loose sense. So I would say qualia might be the experience of redness as opposed to redness itself. So, for example, I could say Peterson and myself both experience red. However, we experience red differently, and that individual experience is what qualia is.
Okay.
Would you say that that individual experience exists?
Would I say individual experience exists?
Like the individual experience of redness, right? So, for example, somebody who's colorblind has a different perception of those wavelengths than you do. Would you say that
Yeah.
you would agree that there's a difference in the experiences and that the experience does exist? There is an individual experience of redness for Peterson.
Yeah, that seems to be testable because we know for a fact that some people have color blindness,
Sure.
right? Like my red might look like your green. That's an unresolvable problem, but we do know that people have unique experiences,
Sure.
or I guess I could say their own experiences.
Okay, so what I would assert about qualia, and many other people would I think, so I don't know if this is unique to me, but qualia is immaterial and not observable. So not something that can be observed under a microscope or something that can be detected. You can observe it indirectly. So for example, we can put you under an MRI and look at your brain when you experience redness, but we're not looking at your individual experience itself in the way that you actually experience it.
Well, you can't. I agree, but you also can't even see me because it's
What do
not
you
like
mean?
pieces of me go into your. Even if we are in the same room together, it's not like pieces of me go into your eye and then into your brain. It's literally just photons.
Yeah, but I'm a little confused what you're getting at by saying that. Like, what are you trying to get across?
Well, you can't see what I'm seeing. I was just saying like, well, yeah, but you don't literally see me either.
No, and I wasn't saying that. What I was more saying is that I was trying to clarify the difference between the observable experience or the observation of qualia and qualia itself.
Sure.
I was saying that there's a difference between the two. So,
So what
for
I would
ex-
say though is the images that you're seeing aren't me. It's your brain hallucinating things. Because no pieces of me, even if we were in the same room, no pieces of me go into your brain, and that's what you see. It's literally just photons stimulating cells, and then
well, I think
whatever
that's a little
happens.
different though than what we mean when we say we see people. What we mean when we say we see people is that we are able to observe them, right? That we are able to uh, capture their essence in some sort of way.
Yeah,
We don't mean that like there's a piece of them entering our perceptive faculties or anything. I also think that on top of that, I do think it's not in line with the colloquial, understanding of what it means to see. So when I say a blind person can't see, I'm not saying that they are lacking the ability to perceive people or pieces of people. I'm more saying that they don't have visual faculties, that they're not able to process light in the same way that an able-bodied person is.
sure. Yeah, it's different. I agree.
Yeah. So what I would say about qualia is that I think intentionality and qualia together prove some form of dualism.
Why is that?
So I would say, as far as intentionality goes, right, from a purely, I think, materialist standpoint, right, nothing nothing holds any sort of objective resemblance to another thing, right? So if everything is just matter, and the matter is composed of atoms, the atoms on a painting, the atoms that make up a painting, right, do not hold an objective resemblance of whatever the painting is depicting. So if you have a painting of the Serengeti, there is no objective relationship, mind independently, between the Serengeti and the actual painting. They're both just, it's just matter. And so what I would say about that is that intentionality, which is the having a referent or having an aim, causes an issue from a materialist standpoint when we understand the brain.
really follow that too closely.
All right, let me
I'm
explain it
not trying to
differently.
be
I think
difficult, I
I think
promise.
no, I understand. I think my explanation was all over the place. I'll start differently. So I think we could say a painting of the Serengeti is a referent to the actual Serengeti. It is a referent to the Serengeti. There is intentionality in the painting, in a sense. Not in the same way that your thoughts hold intentionality, but there is intentionality in the painting.
It's intended
For,
to invoke a certain signal, and if you're a good
yes,
artist, people pick up that signal. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And so if we just observe matter, if we're just observing matter and we're not observing anything else, then there's no objective relationship, mind independently, between the actual painting and the object itself. The mind creates the identity that the two share, right? There's a shared identity that the two have. It's very abstract, and the mind creates it, right? So would we agree on that?
Um, Probably. It
Okay.
doesn't sound unreasonable.
Okay. Perfect. So I would say, um, when you have, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, when you have a memory. So let's say Peterson and myself go to the Serengeti. Actually, we actually go see the Serengeti. And the sense data is stored in our brains, and the neurons contain the sense data wired together to create a memory. And we can refer back to the sense data relatively so. We can refer back to the sense data later. The clump of neurons that holds the sense data holds no objective resemblance or relationship towards the identity of the Serengeti. Do we agree?
What do you mean objective?
Like mind independently, like without us, without some sort of abstract identity or societal view or any of these things, there isn't a direct relationship between the two things, between the neurons and the actual place.
So I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, because if I throw if I throw a rock into a window, the window is broken. Is
Sure.
there a relationship between the arrangement of the broken pieces of glass and that rock? Yes. So when I go and see the Serengeti, those neurons have that same sort of cause and effect. Like when I recall that memory, there's a specific pathway that's going to that I can recall to remember it. I think that that there is a relationship between the Serengeti and that, in the same way that there actually is a relationship between the arrangement of the broken pieces of glass and the rock.
Sure. So I would say earlier you said that I'm not actually seeing you, right? I'm
Yeah.
not. There's not pieces of you entering my eyes, right? You almost said that my brain is hallucinating. And so what I would say about that, in reference to what you just said a second ago, is that when you see the Serengeti, if we were to be consistent about this, you're not really seeing the Serengeti, right? The sense data that your brain
I'm not
interprets,
seeing the actual Serengeti. Yeah.
you're not seeing the actual Serengeti. So there isn't really, although there's a cause and effect relationship, there isn't there isn't a T for T relationship between the two. They don't share an exact identity as we would portray them to, colloquially. Like we would say, yeah, I remember the Serengeti, but in actuality, from what you said, it would not be the case that you actually remember the Serengeti. There's no relationship between the two.
Well, I do remember the Serengeti. I'm just not conjuring it up, right? Like if I I could verbatim rewrite the words of Shakespeare, and it would be the it would be the works of Shakespeare, but it wouldn't be his handwriting. It wouldn't be the works of Shakespeare, right? But
Sure.
I don't see any meaningful difference there.
About what you said, so you're saying now that you do remember the Serengeti, but what I'm saying is you don't remember you remember the Serengeti in the same way that the shattered glass has a relationship to the rock you threw, right?
Yeah.
But the two aren't identical.
Well, no, they're not identical,
And
but
in fact, your
so
memory
yeah.
can change. Your memory, you can misremember this. No, I sorry, I interrupted you, but the memory of the Serengeti can change over time. You can, forget details. The lines become blurred. So I don't think it's fair to say that you if we're to be consistent with like me not seeing you in actuality, I don't think it's fair to say that you are actually remembering the Serengeti, especially because your memory can be influenced. It's not perfect.
Um, I mean, in a way, but then I mean, if that's the case, like, are you saying there's a flaw in my argument, or and you're saying yours is fundamentally different, or are you saying this is what you believe in too?
I'm saying
Because it's
I'm
good.
saying
It
both.
sounds
I'm saying
not quite like solipsism, but almost something like that. Like I could just be like, well, you don't know anything either, or remember
oh no,
anything
I'm not
either.
saying I'm not. It's not a solipsistic argument. No, I'm kind
Right.
of saying both. I'm saying I think what you said. I disagree with what you said, but I'm also saying that I think if you were to be consistent with what you said, then this would follow.
That I don't actually remember the Serengeti.
Serengeti. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I guess fair enough. This is a difficult
Yeah. And
conversation.
no, no, I
I'd have,
understand.
if
Yeah.
this was all written down, I'd have an easier time of actually having responses. But
No, I feel you. Yeah. I'm like, if someone asked me to remember what I said a second ago, I probably would have forgotten. Um, but so what I want to get at next is with the Serengeti, with the memory of the Serengeti, your brain, in the same way that your brain creates a relationship or a complex identity between a painting of the Serengeti and the Serengeti itself, your brain does the same thing with the neurons that it assigns sense data to and the actual Serengeti. It's a
say that
similar
again.
process.
Say that again.
So the same. So when you look at a painting of the Serengeti, we already agreed on
Yeah.
that. When you look at the painting of the Serengeti and then there's a Serengeti itself, your brain creates a relatively abstract and complex identity that the two share. Right? It says that these are the same thing or they're similar. Right? But we
Yes, a
said that the brain
heuristic.
creates this. Exactly, the brain creates this. In a similar way, the brain draws a line between your memory and the Serengeti itself. Your brain is also doing the same thing here.
Okay.
And so what I would say is this brings up what I would think is a minor issue because if the brain is the one that does this externally and the brain is doing this internally, then I would say the brain would have to have some sort of like
Something
a
guiding it.
priori,
Is that what you're
something
trying to?
guiding. Like, and I'm not talking about God
Sure.
at all. I don't want to clarify. I'm not talking
Right.
about God at
Like a
all.
soul.
Like some sort of aspect of consciousness that is aware
Right.
of reality and less faulty. Partially, and
So,
sorry, I'm
sorry.
just want to go, but
I was just gonna say, for me, everything about the way biology works is bottom up, not top down, right? So I think the brain does everything that it does because of unconscious physical processes, right? The movement of atoms and neurotransmitters and all of that. I don't think it's top down. And I don't find that to be a very palatable idea either, because that means that there's some sort of external force that means we're like marionette dolls, the things with the strings or whatever. And
I
the
mean, you're a
soul would be
determinist,
this
right?
this thing. I don't know if it's within us or if it's external from us and manipulates it or whatever. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry, but you are a determinist, right? So I think the idea that we are guided by something else, and our actions are not. You don't believe in libertarian free will, so our actions are not entirely free. I think that's already something that you might warrant.
A soul?
No, no, no. What I'm saying is, you're saying like the idea of this immaterial aspect of consciousness guiding how our brain processes things.
Right.
This creates this like marionette effect, right? And what I'm saying is, I asked you earlier about determinism. That was me in the
Right,
comments.
right, right. So I don't
And
believe in free will. So why would the idea of a soul bother me either? Well, because if the soul is a, like, what's the rational actor? Me or the soul? Or are we both, but the soul just makes me that? And if the soul is the rational actor, then the soul is something other than what I am. and perhaps it has different goals than I do, right? And so that's the part where it's just not a very palatable thought. That's not a compelling argument against it. I admit. I'm just telling you what I think or whatever. But
Sure.
I also just see no evidence of it.
So, but
Whoops.
wouldn't we say that there is the I'm forgetting like the psychological term, but the unconscious mind or the subconscious and the conscious mind, right? So there are
Yeah,
things that
you have a work. We call them System One and System Two. I think Daniel Kahneman came up with that. I'm not
Mhm.
100% sure, but yeah, there's like there's the lazy part of the brain, and then there's the hardworking part of the brain. They're all active, and they do very different jobs.
Absolutely. So isn't this already very plausible then? If we have system one and system two, as you put it, then isn't the idea
Well,
that there is
right, but there's no evidence that those are external. There's very good evidence that they come from our brain.
what if yeah, but what if this I think you're kind of assuming that this immaterial aspect of consciousness is not inside the brain.
Conscious. Well, I don't know what consciousness is, so I'm not really taking a stance on it.
Sure. Okay. Well, I have one last little thought that I think might be relevant.
Sure.
So, if you were to lose an arm, God forbid you were to lose an arm, we would still say that's Peterson,
Yeah.
right? We wouldn't say that's a different person. And when your physical body changes, but you're still identified as the same thing, that means that it's not necessarily your physical aspects that are determining your identity, but something more abstract, like your consciousness, which I think if we wanted to say, well, consciousness is mental, well, even still, if you had a stroke and you lost all, functioning, still say that's Peterson. So I don't think it's material conditions which indicate who you are, or like when we speak or when we consider things or when we think about things. I think it's like this idea of an abstract, you know, uh, mind.
I mean, I guess sort of. Some people are born blind, but there is for some types of congenital blindness, there is a fix to it. So, I mean, before you get the surgery or whatever, you would say this person is blind, right? Like that's literally like a very fundamental aspect of who they are. And then once they can see, it's like, okay, well then are they not the same person anymore? Well, I don't think so, right? They definitely are, but I mean, I think if you remove the brain from somebody, they feel to be who that person was, I guess.